Good morning and welcome to this week's lecture. I'm very excited about our lecturer today, Mr. Kevin Day. Mr. Day is an American whose music has been characterized by the propulsion, syncopated rhythms, and colorful orchestration and instrumental virtuosity. This was said by Robert Kurzinger from the Boston Symphony. Composer Kevin Day has quickly emerged as one of the leading young voices in the world of music composition today, whose music ranges from powerful introspection to joyous exuberance. Kevin Day is an internationally acclaimed composer, conductor, and pianist whose music often intersects between the worlds of jazz, minimalist, Latin music, fusion, and contemporary classical idioms. Day serves as the vice president of the Millennium Composers Initiative, a collective of more than 120 composers from several countries around the world. A winner of the BMI Student Composer Award, a three-time finalist for the ASCAP Morton Gow Young Composer Award, and considered for the 2022 Pulitzer Prize for his Concerto for Wind Ensemble. Mr. Day has composed over 200 works and has had numerous performances throughout the United States, Russia, Australia, Austria, Taiwan, South Africa, and Japan. His works have been programmed by the symphonies of Boston, San Francisco, Detroit, Indianapolis, Houston, and more, as well as several top professional and collegiate wind ensembles. His works have been performed at Carnegie Hall, over in Russia, the Midwest Clinic, and other major venues. And recently he had his Carnegie Hall conducting debut at the 2022 New York International Music Festival. Day has collaborated with the likes of David Childs, Nicky Roman, James Markey, Wendy Richmond, Jen Linderman, De'Mondre Thurman, Herman Diaz, Stephen Cohen, and Jerry Lewis, and more on works for their respective instruments, as well as chamber ensembles like One Found Sound, Axiom Brass, Ensemble del Niente, the Sheffield Chamber Players, the Puerto Rican Trombone Ensemble, the Zenith Saxophone Quartet, the Tesla Quartet, and the Boston Symphony Orchestra Low Brass Section. Day is currently the assistant professor of composition at Wilfrid Laurier University in Waterloo, Ontario, Canada. He's pursuing his DMA in composition from the University of Miami Frost School of Music, where he studies with Charles Norman Mason, Dorothy Hindman, and Lansing McCloskey. He holds an MM in composition from the University of Georgia and a BM, or Bachelor's of Music, in the performance from Texas Christian University. He's an alumnus of Kappa Kappa Psi Honor, National Honor Band Fraternity, and Phi Mu Alpha Symphonia Fraternity of America. Wow, Kevin. I can just say fantastic.
Thank you so much.
And I've known Kevin for several years. First was introduced to him at the All American College Band at Disneyland.
Yes.
And so the path you've taken has been so fabulous to watch. I turn it over to you now. Welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Of course, and thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to get to do this and to get to share a little bit of what I've been up to the last few years. As you've heard, I mean, I've had lots going on. I mean, lots has been happening. And I'm truly getting to do what I love to do, which is just something that I never knew would happen, nor could have foreseen, like, everything that's happened the last few years. But I work as a composer, a conductor, jazz pianist as well. Have done some production, and I'm also an educator. I'm teaching, and so life has gotten very interesting. I'm going to be completing my DMA next year, which I'm super excited for, and then got lots of things on the way. So I'm really looking forward to seeing where that goes. In terms of our conversation today, I mean, I was just going to share a little bit about my experience writing for the Wind Band and my approaches to what that has looked like. That's where most of my work has been coming from for the last, I would say, 10 years or so. I mean, that's really where I began, was in that world. I began as a euphonium player, who later switched to tuba, and so that's what I played in the bands all through middle school, high school, and into college. And that's how I also got into orchestra, was through playing the tuba, and so that's what introduced me to, what classical music was and what that looked like. At the same time, I was also growing up as a jazz and gospel pianist, and so on the weekends I was performing with my parents and at their church, and doing things like that. So my experience growing up was very performance heavy, so much like I thought I was going to be performing, and really that was it. I didn't know that composition would be really where I would find my true passion, and then later getting into teaching. So it's been, once again, it's been a journey for sure, and I'm glad to get to share a little bit of what that looks like here. Um, More so, my approach is what I'm wanting to get into today is actually with the Concerto for Wind Ensemble, because I feel like that's the piece that where this would really heavily apply. This Concerto for Wind Ensemble, and you can find information about this online, as well as the recordings, all of that. This was my biggest compositional endeavor, and this was something that um, took 2 years to compose, and it took lots of time to figure out what this would look like and how. But this was also my first consortium, and so normally for what composers do is, for a work of this scale, multi movements, and then it being 25 minutes long, multiple people joined this group that would basically pay for the consortium for this piece, and so there were 23 schools that joined from the U.S., from Australia, and Canada as well, and so what that looked like was basically, once all that came together, I started working on this piece, and this piece I didn't know would be called Concerto for Wind Ensemble. But the person who brought this idea to me to do this was my former conducting teacher, which was Cynthia Johnston Turner. She was the director of bands at the University of Georgia, but now is the dean at the school that I work at, Wilfrid Laurier University in Canada. And so she was the one who approached me about this massive idea, this massive piece. But she wanted me to write something that was, very true to who I am and true to my background and things like that. And I had to really think about that, because I haven't really addressed that in my music at all. And so I wanted to bring in the influences that I've known and loved so much my whole life. Those influences mostly coming from my parents, and my dad and mom are musical, and my dad was a hip hop and gospel producer for a long time, and also a radio host in Southern California. And then my mother was a gospel singer from West Virginia, who got to sing with the likes of Mel Torme, Kirk Franklin, Fred Hammond, people like that. So those are my parents, and so I mean that was my introduction to music and to what all this looked like as a kid. But I've never really put that in my music, and I, or at least never felt comfortable enough to sort of bring that into the contemporary wind band world and all that. So this was my chance to do so, and so I decided to structure the piece around that, and put other influences too that I love, and have jazz and have fusion and have all these other things that I'm interested in into this very big piece that features um, everyone. It's called Concerto for Wind Ensemble because everyone in this piece has a feature. Everyone in this piece has something that they have to practice. No one can, no one cannot practice. Right. So it's a difficult piece, but I think the payoff is just, being able to bring this music to life and to be able to, just play and have a good time. It's a piece that's meant to evoke joy and having fun. And so my approach to this piece ended up being structuring this into 5 particular movements, sort of separating out the different sections of this piece. And so the movement titles are flow, riff, vibe, soul, and jam. And so I chose one word titles because I think I didn't want to try to come up with anything too esoteric, but also I think those get to the point of what each movement basically you're going to hear. Um, and so the first movement, flow, is about different ideas, of course, flowing from one to another. It's supposed to be introducing a lot of the material you're going to hear in the piece. Riff is entitled Riff because, mostly going back to jazz, it's about all these jazz riffs and introducing this material, and there's improvisation involved, and there's all these jazz elements. Movement 3 is entitled Vibe, and I called it that mostly because that's kind of a slang term that young people like myself use nowadays. But it's like it's a feeling, it's a good feeling, and it's usually it's meant to kind of evoke like this like laid back kind of music, and so that's why this movement was called Vibe, and I really enjoyed that, and that's pulling mostly from my dad's hip hop influence and R&B and all of that. And then movement 4 is called Soul, which is coming from my gospel roots and more so my mother with her singing. And so that's what happens to be in that movement. And it's a movement that I didn't have at first. Actually, I added this at the last minute because I think this piece just needed something that was a bit of a break from all the technical craziness that you hear in the previous 3 movements. So this is a nice sort of breath from that, and it's a break into this world that's a bit more calm. And then jam is the last movement that is what it sounds like. It's meant to kind of jam all the ideas that I introduce into this one movement, but also it's meant to be kind of like a jam session, and it's meant to be really fun, and it's a closer. And so that's how I structured this piece. And so my approach, the challenge with this piece was figuring out how do I take all this music that's been in my head for 20 some years, how do I get this into this context, into this traditionally classical context? How do I bridge that gap? And so what I would like to do is just play maybe a couple of movements from this, and then I guess if we can go into like more about this, then yeah, I'd be happy to share. So I'll just play movements 1 and 2. What you're gonna hear, these recordings were professionally done by the Arizona State University Wind Ensemble, ran by Jason Kasler, who is the director of bands there. And they did a really wonderful job with these recordings, and I think they're going to be released commercially at some point in the next few months. But yeah, so you'll see video, you'll see audio, but here's the first 2 movements of Concerto for Wind Ensemble. So I'm going to share screen. Oh, can I get permission to share, please?
Yes, I apologize.
No worries, no worries.
All right, let me go ahead and do that real quickly for you. All right, there you go.
Okay. All right. Okay. Not sure why this is here. Oh, did it kick me out? Okay, one sec. There we go. I love Zoom. Okay. Here is movement 1, and then I'll play movement 2 with a little bit of an intro from each one. Okay.
All right.
One sec. Resume share. Hold on a sec. It's not letting me. Hold on. Why is it?
I have it pulled
Yes.
up, but with the UGA Wind Ensemble.
Oh, okay.
Here that if that I don't, we could share. So and then do you just want to play the first 2 movements?
Yes.
Okay, and so you just tell me when to hit stop, and then we can if that's okay with you. Does that work?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on with Zoom, but yeah, no, that's totally fine.
All right. So this is Concerto for Wind Ensemble by Mr. Kevin Day. Okay, so here we go. And everyone has seen it. And enjoy. let me go ahead and stop share and let me just say, wow.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Wow. I mean, well, first of all, you titled this a contemporary approach, but we're going to get into that for a second because I'm just so overwhelmed in listening to that. It was like you created this conversation between the different instruments.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you go from like what you hear with all those layers and of tones and a blank piece of paper to get that?
That's a good question. Well,
I mean, I often tell here's why I teach art history here at Saddleback for the Emeritus. And
yeah.
we look at these artists, I show a blank piece of paper to remind my students that this is what they started with.
Mm-hmm.
And so, wow. But please, I mean,
yeah, I mean, for me, with this piece, with those two movements in particular, I mean, it was figuring out like it was honestly it was a lot of experimenting with different sound combinations and how like they're moving from one to another, and then also for riff, it was just figuring out the layers I wanted to do and how they would interact with each other and make sense to fit into this, kind of obscure puzzle, is really how it feels. But no, I mean, it was a lot of it's trial and error. Is like, I mean, when I was working on it, I was just putting in ideas that I had, and I was, playing these jazz riffs on, piano or whatever, and just seeing, okay, this might work here. And so a lot of it's just seeing, like, trying to put pieces together and see if they fit. And that was a really fun part about those movements, was just figuring out what pieces would work. But it's like I had the idea of what the first. Usually, it's like a rhythmic idea, and so for riff, it was just like that bass clarinet idea was the first thing in my head, and I was like, okay. And then with that, I just kept repeating that until I could find something to go with it. And then I added the tuba euphonium lines, and then later added saxophones and clarinets and all these layers until it gets to the point where they all just kind of sync up like that. And so that was just really fun just to work on, just to practice and see what it ended up being. So that, I mean, there's no like, I wish I had a more eloquent answer, but a lot of it was just like, just sitting down at the computer and trying different instrument combinations until I got the one that sounded what was close to what I was imagining.
So when we say like with the contemporary approach, would you say the computer plays a big role with all of that?
I think it can. I mean, I like with what I use like there's a playback software I use called Note Performer, and I use it with the Finale notation software. And so that software will get you pretty close to what it will sound like with live musicians, minus things like location or how many players and things like that. But it gives you a good idea of what it's going to sound like. So that has been helpful. The contemporary approaches were more so just the specific like techniques used in like writing this, and so a lot of this had to deal with layering techniques. A lot of it had to do with figuring out what kind of scale combinations I wanted to use, figuring out what instruments were going to be featured as a soloist, and I mean, those were things that actually changed quite often in this piece as I was constructing it, and I started showing this to friends of mine. They would give me ideas for better solos to do for those instruments, and then we would try them, and I'd be like, okay. And then most of the time it was them proving me wrong, because I would be like, there's no way a tuba can play that solo. Like in movement one, that tuba solo was a piccolo solo. Like originally, it was for piccolo. So like when I showed it to my friend, he's just like, Kevin, you're a tuba player. Why is this a piccolo solo? And I'm like, I thought it'd be cool. He's like, no. This has to be a tuba solo. I'm like, this can't be done on tuba. I don't think it's possible. And my friend Joseph Guimaraes was the one who told me this, and he's now playing, I think, in the U.S. Navy band. But at the time, we were together at the University of Georgia, and so he picked up his tuba, played the solo perfectly, and I was like, okay, yeah, I'll keep it. So stuff like that where it was a lot of conversations with people. But yeah, I mean, the techniques were just, me trying to experiment with different scalar combinations, with different, with really different rhythmic choices, and seeing how they would interact with one another, and playing with things like dissonance and consonance and conflict, tension, all of these like things, and how I would use them. So
Can you expand a little bit for our students about like the layering technique? I mean, I know a little bit about music, but
mm,
explain a little bit more with the layering because I know I use that word too.
yes, musically speaking, it's normally when you take a musical idea and then you have a counter idea to that, and then from there you just keep building on these counter ideas until you have this section where there's lots of stuff going on at once, and you can either choose to sort of have them sync up like I did, where it's like they all end at a certain point and then reset, or they can slowly taper away, or like you sort of going in reverse order, where now you have all these ideas, you can slowly remove one and then remove the other until you're left with what you had at the beginning. So that's how I can best explain it. So
So I guess when you're writing a concerto piece, do you say like, okay, I want this many pieces? Because I do like how you said you have the instruments sync up, reset, and then do they go to the next movement? I mean, how do you decide all of that?
yeah, I mean, it's intuition. I treat composition as improvisation, and that's those two things to me are intertwined. And with this piece, it felt like I was improvising in the moment, these decisions. So like that at the beginning of movement two, where like everything is being layered, and then it gets to that moment where that ends, and then we go into the, I guess we call in jazz, the head of the piece, what the main melody of the movement would be. um that was a choice I made in the moment to say, okay, we're going to switch to this, and then this is going to be the main idea as we go forward. But those decisions are made very much in the moment, just like with improvisation. You're making up you're making up music in the moment. You're composing on the spot, and so that's how I approached it with this piece.
Yes, and I know in with my son Stephen,
Mm,
who of course does jazz drums,
yeah,
with the improv, I know for drummers, when they do those fills, he says that you never do the same one again. Is it
right.
is that much like how it is, with with a regular instrument like your instrument in jazz, you just never do it again?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, it's you want to have variety, and you want to have things that for the audience that'll be interesting, and then for yourself, like if you're playing the same thing over and over again, it can get kind of monotonous after a while. So yeah, having variety of drum fills, or for a variety of licks, a variety of that, I think that helps to enhance the composition, because otherwise just the same thing over and over again, which can be, monotonous to listen to and to play. So
Well, and I did notice in the video, and I know uh, the students but also noticed this, that some of them were wearing masks. So
hmm.
was this all during the pandemic, this process, or was it finished?
Yeah, I mean, so I started this concerto right before the pandemic, and because we made the announcement about this piece in I think January 2020, and then after that, then a few months later is when we were under is when we were under lockdowns. So I was working on this piece during during the onset of the pandemic. I was writing this piece, and honestly, it kind of got me through that time, because I was focusing all my energy into this music, and so yeah, when we did the premiere, the premiere of this piece was actually supposed to happen at a conference that got postponed due to COVID, and it was postponed 2 years, actually 3 years later, because it's a national conference that happens, every few years. So that gave me more time to work on this than I had initially, and so which is why it ended up being 2 years, and then we did the premiere at the University of Georgia in September of 2022. And so Yeah, that's about when like they were still wearing masks and everyone was still like going through procedures and things like that. But we did it. They did it. I mean, it was amazing. Jackie Hartenberger did an incredible conducting the group, and I mean, they learned it in quick time too. Like learned it in a few rehearsals and just came out like swinging, and it was amazing.
Wow, that leads that actually tells something about the musicianship of the
Mhm.
program.
Yes.
To get their students in I guess one would say in shape during a time when they probably had been separated.
Right. Yeah. It was during a time where, I mean, for that first year, I mean, we didn't have a whole lot going on, and most of us were virtual. I mean, the other thing is, I mean, I was in school with the people in the ensemble. Like we were in classes together, and a lot of them I was friends with. So really, it felt more of a collaborative. Like I could feel more of that collaboration with my friends with the premiere than anything else. So I'm really grateful for them for that.
Oh, that's excellent. So now, one more question before we move on, because I'm just so um, interested in again that initial process. Where you go from a blank piece of paper to one filled with many notes for many instruments.
Hmm.
So, do you complete the piece first, or do you complete each movement and then you create connections?
It's all like I create the connections as I go, and especially with this piece, it was figure like I began basically writing it in order of what it would be, minus the soul movement, which was added later. But wrote one, two, three, and five, basically just in order, so I can make those connections as I was going, and would make callbacks to certain movements, and could create those bridges as I was working on it in time. Um, and then later, the only thing I did at the end of that, once those four movements were written, was listen to it and be like, okay, I need to add another movement, and that's where soul came in.
Mhm.
And then I was able to still make that connection in that movement to previous ones, and then it fit right into the structure because I already had took the time to work on that for several months just to make those uh, bridges work. So yeah, a lot of that for me happens in the moment, and even with pieces that are not this large in scale, structure is usually something I create as I go. Once again, just like improvisation, just improvising what that looks like.
That's excellent. I guess I'm thinking about the xylophone part at one,
Mm,
that you just give them this amazing, little section, and I just see their hands flying, and I'm like, wow.
yeah,
But it adds such a beautiful element to the piece at that time, and it just reminds me of the journey,
yeah.
that you get us started on.
Definitely, definitely, and yeah, I mean that UGA has some incredible percussion players, so yeah,
Yes.
they could just do all that stuff, and it was really cool. So yeah,
Um, well, if it's okay with you, can we listen to the next couple
sure,
pieces?
yeah, sure. So movements 3 and 4, yeah, sure thing.
Okay. And all right, my friends, let me go ahead and share my screen. And here we go. All right. And so this is movements 3 and 4.
Yeah, so that is.
Hold on, we'll get to 5 in just a moment. I was mesmerized by the music.
No problem.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, as you were saying before, I have a couple of questions I'd like to ask.
No, that's fine. I was just gonna say, yeah, so that was movement 3 and 4, vibe and soul. And yeah, I love those movements as well. Lots of interplay and lots to talk about with that stuff. So
Yes,
yes.
I was going to, first off, it's like you bring us on such highs and lows. And what I mean by not just the feelings of the music, but even just like very high tones with certain instruments and then very low. Um,
Mm.
Again, how, describe that. I mean, describe that process of like how to add those when you're composing. I mean,
Yeah, I mean with vibe, I wanted to start with something a bit more mellow, and so I decided to start with the saxophone section feature. Of course, that's reminiscent of jazz having like a sax solo section, but I wanted to sort of feature them not doing something, super crazy, but just sort of introducing the main melody of that movement, and so I decided that, and then um after that chord happens with the wind chimes, all that stuff. I mean, it's really it's kind of like a competition between the different sections that you have. So it's like the saxophones plays their thing, and then flute and oboe and piccolo does a thing, and then clarinets do their thing. And so they're almost trying to like almost one up each other, So they're having this kind of friendly competition thing, but they keep getting interrupted by the trumpets, by the trombones, by the horns. So they keep interjecting. So a lot of this was just having the sections, and using the colors of each particular section work against each other in that particular instance before once again they all kind of come together, they snap into place, and then we're moving on to something else. And that's something else. It ended up being this very intricate layering that happens where it's this, how do I describe it? It's more of like an arpeggiated passage in like the piano and the marimba and the harp, and they repeat that. Then clarinets have their thing, then horns, then all this other stuff. And then it starts to get into this building of all of these ideas. And so it gets to that big moment where it gets to the peak of that, where it's almost like a shout chorus, and in the trumpets and well, in the whole band, but trumpets are kind of leading that. And so that was how, I mean, yeah, it is like playing with highs and lows and mids, and introducing those in different ways before having them all come in at the same time.
and I think at the end of the of vibe, I call it my Gene Kelly movement because some of the melodies were reminiscent
Mhm.
of some of those musical,
Wow.
and I could see
Hmm.
in my mind when I listen to music as a former dancer myself, I'm always choreographing, right? But I could just see Gene Kelly doing his big dancing moves, and at the very end, it brings us back down. And he gives us that look, right? Camera,
Right.
fade away, he comes down.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it was just such a beautiful journey
Hmm.
with that piece, and I also like how you keep this jazz mood throughout this whole piece, and
Yeah.
so how do you balance this jazz with being with the symphony piece? I mean,
Yeah.
how does that
I
balance?
mean, I sort of, I mean, that's the language, right? That's the language I use throughout this entire piece. It's a lot of extended harmony. It's a lot of added chords. It's a lot of that stuff. And so, I mean, there's not a balance. It's like, no, this is what this piece is. You're gonna get it all. And so it's like this. It's throughout the entire piece. And so, I mean, that was one thing I wanted this to stand out in a big way. I mean, there have been other concertos for wind ensemble that have been written in the past, and but I wanted to really do something with the language that I know the best, and try to bring that into this medium. So no, it's very intentional. It's on purpose. Everything is very much centered around what that music is.
Um, and then perhaps for some of our students who might not have such a musical background, explain like what is a wind ensemble and how that differs from like a jazz ensemble, because you're
Sure thing. I mean, okay, now we're getting into terminology stuff. Okay, like
well, not too
concert
much
band.
terms, not too much terms, like it's layman's terms.
Yeah, no, I got you. Wind ensemble is an extension of the concert band. Concert band is I mean it's a group of winds, brass, and percussion that you get. Um, and wind ensemble is a smaller, traditionally speaking, is a smaller version of that. It's not as small as chamber winds, which is usually like a small, like, chamber group, but what wind ensemble usually implies is one instrument per part, or sorry, one person per part. And so you have, instead of 12 flutes in a concert band, you have one or maybe two. But it's meant to be a smaller version of a concert band that will give you a lot more clarity, that will give you in some ways more room to add different voices. So like, for example, we're looking here at the UGA video, you'll see there's a piano there. We have piano in the mix, and you'll see that in a lot of things. We have harp, which is something you don't typically see that much in concert band, but in wind ensemble you'll see a lot of. And then on the side there, you'll see string bass. That's been something that's been coming up a lot more, and so you'll have those instruments as well that are included with this one on a part wind ensemble. But that's typically what that looks like. Concert band is usually those larger groups. You have multiple players per instrument. Symphony, you get beyond that, it starts getting larger and larger. So that's how I'd explain it.
I would say also no strings.
Also, no strings, right? That's a big thing.
Yeah, yeah,
No
yeah.
strings for this, except for right,
Yeah.
string bass. But everything else, yeah, it's all winds, all woodwinds, all brass, all percussion, and so yeah, that's what makes up this medium.
Oh, thank you for that. I probably should have asked that in the very beginning. So students, I apologize.
Well, that's okay. That's okay.
You're wondering. Anyways, but going back to that peak, um, how how high, or how do you decide how high that peak should be in music? Because you bring us to the peak, and then you have to drop. I guess. So how do you decide that? I mean, what what's the thought process, if you can share? If you can, because I know it's all in your mind. So
I mean, the thought process with Vibe essentially was I wanted to get to a point where the melody would come back in some way. The melody from the very beginning with the saxophones would come back, but I didn't want it to be at a whisper like it is at the beginning. I wanted it to come back as this roaring idea, this huge idea. So I knew that before I started really writing it. I knew I wanted to introduce the main idea and then somehow work my way up to it. And that's where that section in the middle builds and builds and builds and builds and builds to this peak. And I could have chosen to end it a bit more like in the movement, a bit more like at a peak, but I decided since I actually had to change the ending basically. When I wrote movement 4, I changed the ending for 3, so that way it would be more of a segue into what movement 4 would be, rather than what would have been going into jam, which is not what I wanted to do. So yeah, I changed the ending so that way it would reach that peak, it would get to that level, and then we pull the rug out, and then we're here, and then we slowly go back down, which leads into the beginning of movement 4, which is very soft. So yeah, I think that's how I, as far as like the overall structure of that, that's what I wanted to do in the moment. Not every movement has a peak. I mean, I don't think movement 1 has a big peak. Movement 2 has a peak. Movement 3 does. Movement 4 does. But I think these are things, once again, decisions you make in the moment based on the context of either what's came before or what comes after.
okay, excellent. So, and in that move in that of the moment, um, when is that this continuing process? I mean, I guess my question is,
Mhm.
well, two parts. So I'll just read it as I wrote it. I said, when you listen to a piece of music, do you ever continue to make changes in your mind? So that's part one. Because then the second
Yep.
part would be, how do you know when it's done so that to walk away? Because you just mentioned how, it peaks and then you bring it back and then you have this overall plan.
Mhm.
How much are you committed to the plan in the beginning as you go through it when you're at the end? Are you so committed to that original outline?
Not always. No, I mean, I to answer your first question, yeah, like I think of as I'm listening to something, I think of the things I could have done differently for sure. But I mean, that's every piece of music I feel like I've ever written. But there comes a point where you've revised and edited and all that so much that it's like you could continue doing it for a long time. But I mean, similarly to I mean what you mentioned being in art history, there's a point where you just get a feeling that you know what, this feels complete for now. I know I could probably do more, but I like the product that this is. I like what this has turned out to be. So, I mean, after 2 years of working on this piece, I was just like, yeah, I think I feel I feel good about it. I know I could probably do some stuff. I know I could probably tweak it and tweak it and tweak it, but there's comes a point where you're just like, yeah, I feel like you know what, this is what I envisioned. That this is what I want to release into the world and let people hear and critique and all that. And I'm very proud of this piece. But I mean, yeah, there's definitely things I go back and do. And I feel like this is it's a composer thing. It's like we're gonna have this happen with every piece in some way. So it's something I've come to accept. It's not about perfectionism. I just you get a gut feeling that's like, okay, I feel like this is ready. This is good to go, and let's just see what happens. And you never know what the outcome would be.
Yeah, that's excellent. Well, why don't you set up the last movement for us?
Sure. Yeah. So Jam is the culmination of all the ideas that I had, and a few more things, a few more surprises in this as well. But it's meant to be this driving closing piece after you get movement four, and that's calm, serene, ends in this really beautiful way. Then movement five wakes you up. And it's like, oh no, we're not done. We're gonna we're gonna close this, and it's yeah, lots going on. So yeah, I hope you enjoy movement five.
Okay, great. And I just realized that I forgot to hit stop share. So sorry students, but here we go. We're all set.
All right.
So jam. let the applause go. No standing for our applause. Oh, fantastic. And students, I will stop share this time. There we go. Wow. And to listen to the whole piece and oh, just so beautiful. I like how you kind of bring us home in that last movement. Could you kind of explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, so that last shout chorus that happens where you hear that melody, the ba 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 da ba da da, like that is the movement one melody just stretched out longer. And so I felt that as a return to the main point of the whole piece. After all these notes, all the things, was that main idea at the very beginning. And so it's very much a return to home, and how we get there is just sort of going through this labyrinth of all of the material, all the things that you heard in very quick succession. So you have to really listen to the different gestures and hear, okay, what movement was that? What movement was that? But everything's in there, like everything that I used and in some ways in there. And so after that happens, there's this moment where we get into this 7/8 groove thing that I haven't introduced in this piece, that I just wanted to throw something new in there. And then there's a solo feature that happens. And this solo was actually written as a bassoon solo. So this is one of the solos in the piece that can be interchangeable, where you can either have a bassoon player play it or tenor saxophone. And in this recording, they did tenor sax, but other groups have done either. But it's a big feature moment for them over this really obscure drum groove, and everything just feels a bit shaky, but it's meant to be shaky. And then everyone's like, okay, now we're back. And once again, everything snaps in, and then we're in the groove again. And so a lot of it was just messing around with that stuff. It was really fun just to, play with different grooves and then see what the solo instrument would end up being. And then that build up leading into the trumpet solo. I actually have my score right here, because there's a visual thing that people may not realize with this piece. There's one giant mistake that I ended up keeping and turning into something. And I was trying to do something in finale, and it ended up making this.
Oh my.
It ended up making an X. And I was like, what? Then I listened to it. I was trying to do something else, and it like defaulted to this. And then I listened to it, and I was like, huh, okay, I actually like that. And so that happens for the next, I don't know, 1, 2,
wow,
3, 4. I just kept it going and adding stuff in there up until it gets to here. So 4 pages of that. Because I'm like, you know what, that's cool. Why not? And visually, I mean, it looks like it's going back and forth and all that. So that's something you may not know. Big trumpet solo, and then it leads into the main melody shout chorus right there. And then just to throw one last crazy lick, having that part at the end with the trumpet part. So that little lick in there, and then ending it with the drum solo and then the big chord. So yeah, I mean, this was all just just like really fun to write, really fun to work on. So
well, I mean, and you can tell even now, right, that it still evokes that fun. We could see it in your response. So what did it feel like when you first heard it for the first time? I mean, I can't even imagine that moment.
I was okay. So I was a bit. I was worried because I realized, like, okay, this is the hardest piece I've ever done. I don't know how it's going to sound. I don't know how it's going to turn out. So there was that nervous anticipation of hearing it for the first time. But when when they brought me back in to do the premiere at Georgia, yeah, it was eye opening. It was really something. And that, I mean, the payoff for every composer, I feel like, is when you hear your music go from computer to like people. That's always a really eye-opening experience. So yeah, when I heard Georgia do it the first time, I was like, wow. And so, as I sat with them in rehearsals, we worked on it, we refined things. I mean, and then it came together. It was a really amazing premiere. And then, since then, many other groups have been able to work on it and play it and put their own spin on it. So no, I mean that was very eye opening, and I got to hear things that I couldn't hear in the program. Actually, hear in the computer, but that I heard live. I was like, I didn't even know that was there. Certain nuances, things that you lose from just hearing everything like this.
Mhm.
So yeah, it was very eye opening for sure.
So now, also for our students who might not realize, because you've mentioned some terms like finale, and then even
Mm.
just the computer. Explain how you do use the computer to compose something like this when it's just you.
Yeah, I mean, I use Finale, and there are other notation programs like this that it's a sheet music program, and so like just how I showed this page here with everything, you
Which I
can
love. That is
yes,
great.
yeah, you can program this with different instruments and different combinations, and you just write in the sheet music, and then it plays it back for you. And so having a program like that's been very helpful. um, but yeah, you get set up from the very beginning, and then the playback, the playback that comes with the software, is called Garriton. But I ended up switching from that to Note Performer, and I just like that a lot better. But yeah, it's meant to give you a representation, some kind of audio representation of what this music is going to sound like. And so I love to use that. So
Do I guess the modern composer are these tools that everyone is using? I mean, no.
mostly yes. I mean, not saying all composers use this. I have friends who do things with like graphic scores where instead of writing sheet music, it's actually a really cool intersection between music and art, where it's almost like you're writing, you're creating artwork, and then the musician looks at that artwork and tries to interpret what you mean. So there are composers who do that. There are composers who do things that come from more like traditions that are oral, so like they making up things, or singing things from certain traditions that have been passed down. And then there's sheet music too. I mean, so there's many ways of conveying musical idea that is not just notation, but it can be art, it can be dance, it can be all sorts of things.
Yeah. So how well, because since then you've done other compositions and such, how do you make each composition stay fresh or be fresh?
I mean, I think it's just I'm very cognizant of what I've done already, and I try not to, kind of going back to what we were talking about, like with repetition. I try not to repeat myself the same way. If I'm going to do a similar idea, then I want to do it in a different way. And I had that drilled into me as a young composition student. Like, if you're gonna repeat something, if you're gonna have if you're gonna have a repeat sign in your piece, then make it intentional. Make it why are you saying this twice? If you're gonna say it twice, and say it maybe a different way the second time. So that was always something that I took with me from a lot of my lessons with my undergraduate teacher in particular. But yeah, I feel like that's also now stepped into more of like, yeah, I try to listen. I mean, part of it is listening to as much music as possible. I listen to lots of things, and that influences what I write as well. But I also, yeah, I'm cognizant of what I've done already, and I've tried to look for new sounds and look for new things. And that's helping me continue to grow. So.
That's excellent. Would you say, um, I mean, I guess in composing, your goal is to finish each piece. I mean, and then,
Yes.
um, I guess ideally, collectively, would you like to be known for like the Kevin Day sound? And what would that be?
I don't know. I mean, that's something I can't control, is like how people, what I'm labeled as, or what, like, what that sound would even be. I know this sound, what I have done has been based on a lot of things rhythmically, a lot of things with
Mhm.
intensity, a lot of things with different colors, things like that. I mean, that's
Yeah.
stuff I hope to carry forward. But I do hope that my writing, continues to change and evolve, and over time, just kind of seeing where that leads. I know right now it's led me into some interesting directions as far as writing this double concerto I'm doing for orchestra, and then later getting into a project that I'm going to be announcing very soon that is going to be an opera, and working with voices
Wow.
um, and all that, what that looks like. So it's all evolving and changing, and I'm open to it. So we'll see where things go.
Well, I was say you're also very young for all your accomplishments, so see a long road ahead of you.
Yeah, yeah. I just have to slow down. I'm trying to get myself to slow down and just take things a bit more in stride. Don't say yes to everything, and just also, I mean, yeah, I need to enjoy the last part of my 20s a little.
Yes.
So there's that too. So yeah, I mean, who knows where life will go, but I'm very grateful for where it has gone. So
Well, now going back to your music, I mean, do you? And I think I might have asked this before. How do you know when a piece is done? How do you know when it's like, okay, drop it? Turn off the lights. It's done. I have to walk away.
well, it's usually that is influenced by a deadline. So if
Okay.
there's a deadline of, hey, we need this piece by this day, then
Points for honesty there. I love it.
yeah, usually deadlines play. If it's not a deadline thing, it's a gut feeling thing. Like as I've said before, it's like it's something that is like, okay, I feel like this is what I can say in this moment. I feel like if I go any more, it might take away from it, etc. So that's generally it. Or so it's either that, or it's like, okay, I have until this day to do it. Anything past that I can't do, so I'm gonna turn it in as it is for that.
As it
So
is. So, do you have any of your favorite modern day composers, or even
yeah.
composers from the past that you just like? Okay, so that like, okay, I can listen to them all the time and such.
Yeah, I mean, I'm inspired by composers of old and new. I'm inspired by, you know, Mahler, Tchaikovsky, and Lord, Shostakovich in a lot of ways. And but in modern days, I mean, I'm inspired by like Tanya Leon, Jennifer Higdon, Gabriella Lena Frank. I'm inspired by Terrence Blanchard. I'm inspired by Kendrick Lamar, Kamasi Washington. I mean, there's so many people that influence what I'm doing, and so yeah, I think it's all working its way into my music in some way. So
That's excellent. So, of course, I have to ask the question: do you have a favorite piece that you've done that you just
yes,
like? Ooh, that's it.
yeah, I would have to say it would be my euphonium concerto that I did for Demondre Thurman. That was my first concerto, my first big collaboration, and also I think the thing that uh, changed my whole life because it was this piece resulted in a viral moment on social media that happened back in 2019, where this clip that Demondre posted of him playing this concerto that I wrote for him went viral overnight and got shared by Classic FM, and it's this really short clip that he did at the end of the first movement, but he captioned it, Kevin Day is trying to kill all euphonium players that attempt his concerto, like kind of in a joking way. It's a very difficult piece, but then he just gets on there and shreds, and then this video got over 450,000 views on Facebook, and basically catapulted me um, into the international spotlight in a big way. He was already in the international spotlight. I mean, he's well known and has been doing this for many years, but it was my first time where that happened, and so it was a big moment. And then from that point on, that happened, a long time ago. It's been this continuous wave of things. So
Is any chance we can get a quick glimpse of it all,
what?
or just what it sounds like?
Oh, the clip?
Yes.
Yes. Let me see how I can do this.
Don't mean to put you on the spot, but I know my students, and they're going to be like, "Well, we want to hear that."
Okay, well, let me find it. Actually, yes, it's right here. I'll quickly share a screen and see if I can see if it worked this time for me.
Okay.
Um, okay. Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay. Can you hear this? Is a better question. Let's see.
Yes.
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 Okay. Yeah. So here's the clip. So as you can see, well now, yeah, 471. Here's the clip. And so that's all the clip was. That it was that
Wow.
short thing, and that was in TCU. That was at our rehearsal at TCU. We were working on that, and yeah, that's the clip that
Wow.
changed a lot of things.
That's a clip heard around the world. That's awesome.
Right?
That, but I could see, oh my goodness.
Mhm. Yeah,
um, for a euphonium player, I mean, just wow. That's all I could say.
yeah,
That is
he's
amazing.
amazing. Demandre is absolutely amazing.
So now, I guess one of my last questions is that,
Mhm.
well, first of all, did you think you were going to be on this road as a composer, or like when I first met you, with All American College Band, um, were you already thinking composing at that time, or were you just like, hey, I just want to be a musician? I just, we got to get the gigs.
Yeah, I mean, I was composing a little bit at that time. I had had a few things happen with uh, uh, Dancing Fire and a few of my other pieces, but I didn't know it would turn into what it is now. No, I had no clue. I that was around the time I was trying to figure out what I really wanted to do, and that summer helped me figure that out. Actually, after working with Ron and working with the band and my friends in that group, I think for a lot of us, we figured out what we really wanted to do after that summer. So I left Disney after that and went back and really wanted to get into composition. And part of that was because while I was there doing Disney, I had a lesson with Frank Kelly, and we were able to set that up. And that lesson completely just changed my life. And I love Frank and just appreciate his wisdom and what he told me then. And I mean, since then it's been that's what I've really wanted to do. So
That's excellent. So now that leads to my next question: that if somebody came up to you, a young person, and says, "Hey, I want to be a conductor or a composer," or their parents say, "Hey, my son wants to be your daughter. My daughter wants to be a composer," what advice would you give them?
yeah, I mean, I would say like give them the space to create and really foster that and help to support them in opportunities to be able to collaborate. When I was first beginning, I was just writing for my friends. I was writing for people at high school, and then once I got into TCU, I was writing for my friends there. And but even in the midst of that, my parents were there to be very supportive and would give me the space to compose or to write or to listen to music. And so all that was very important too. And so I think just creating an environment where they can explore different musics and explore different outlets, and figure out what do they want to write about and all that. Just being there to support them is very important.
Excellent. Do you is there okay, I'm trying to formulate the question in my mind.
Mhm.
But I guess, what's the importance of seeing music live versus seeing it either in a recording or just like on the radio or and
Yeah,
such? I mean,
there's nothing like it. I love seeing concerts live and being there and feeling the music. That's something like being there in person to physically feel it is something
yeah.
that like I just love. And so no, I think that's very important. And what's been great about all these performances is getting to hear groups and getting to meet musicians who are passionate about what they do and who exude that through their performances, and you could feel it as an audience member being in there and hearing that. So yes, I love it.
Yeah. Do you ever create music thinking that I want the audiences to feel this way, or is it just really articulating what's in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I really like I think my goal as a composer is I present the music and the audience, it interprets it and takes away from it as they will. So I don't go in it with a set expectation of I want them, to feel this way because they may not feel that way about it. They may have a whole other feeling. I mean, so that's I think that's the beauty of music and about art is that we leave it up to the viewer to the listener to interpret, walk away with their own conclusions of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love it because you are truly an artist. And I feel like I'm getting a peek inside I'm a master. I mean, your work is just amazing, Kevin. And I think about it when I think about artists of the past, like physical artists, meaning, the different layering of images and they just do the art. And we, as a viewer, interpret. So I guess we as a listener also, interpret your music.
Yes, definitely.
That is fantastic. So if there was one, now putting you on the spot, if there was one piece of music, okay, I'll even let you decide over all of history. So you can pick anything.
Oh.
Or should I narrow it down? But I mean, do you have like a go-to piece? I mean, do you have a piece where it's like, man, I just can't figure this out. I'm gonna go put this on because it gets me going again. Whether it's jazz or classical or any type of music, or do you have a type or genre of music that does that to you to kind of like,
Yeah, for me it's not necessarily hyping me up to do it, but it's generally I listen to music that actually helps me stay calm, like and gets me mentally in a place where I can write, because it's often like creating the environment where I can focus in and be able to do it. And a lot of that time that leads me to listening to like more so like slower, more lyrical music, classical music or ambient music, things that are help me slow down. Actually helps me to write some of the stuff that's very fast, where I don't feel like I'm anxious or worked up too much, but I can just sort of focus and be like, okay, let's write, and then I can get to it. So I mean, there's nothing in particular I can there's many pieces I can name. I think like I've been listening, and I have a few playlists with the music of composer Max Richter, and he writes this beautiful slow music that is very very like soothing and helps me stay calm. And there's many albums of his music that are like that, and so that helps me just kind of get into a peaceful headspace to be able to do what I do. So I'd say like things like that.
So because it's all coming from your mind. I mean, are you always hearing music and then composing in your mind, or I mean, what's that like?
Yeah, I'm always hearing music, I'm always listening, and I always am getting ideas, and they come and go, and I just have to you know figure out which, like, what's actually going to be something I'm going to use versus just, oh, okay, I heard this random thing and be like, okay, I don't know if that's ever going to work. But I mean, listening all the time helps me, and then just I get ideas and I try to get them down the page as quickly as possible, and if I can't, then that's okay. I'll hopefully come up with something else. But yeah, that's generally my process.
So now the next question I want to ask is because of like music and the arts in schools.
Yes.
I I mean, I know you know that it's important to have it in the younger schools and such. Do you know of any type of like advocacy programs and things that are happening to try to keep music in schools? Or I mean,
Yes.
things about that.
Yes, I think like actually, I mean, right now, why I'm here in Philly, and actually why I just got a call to come down to
Okay.
the car. I'm here working with a group called Play on Philly that is meant to, um, that's basically creating programs for music students here in the Philadelphia area, mostly coming from impoverished communities, and they're bringing them together. So I'm here working with these kids, and I'm actually going to be writing a piece for them, and so things like that where like they're really making an impact on the community, and it's a very inclusive program, and all that. But there's many organizations like this across the country that are trying to keep music going in communities and schools, and providing these opportunities to children to be able to learn and grow. And so I think that's amazing, and I say, yeah, let's continue with that, and continue with that advocacy, and continuing to to include as many as we can.
Excellent. Well, Kevin, I do want to thank you so much for this musical journey
Thank
and
you
for
so much.
sharing your concerto. Um, and students, continue to ask your questions, and we'll get them to Mr. Day or Kevin um, for him to answer. But
Yes,
just thank you so much.
thank you so much for the invitation, and y'all take care.